So, how are you doing with your New Year's resolutions? Did you even make any, or are they broken already? Well, fear not, because my next guest is the king of self-improvement, having built an online community of over 1.5 million subscribers who follow his talks and debates on modern wisdom. I'm delighted to welcome, all the way over from Austin, the podcaster and YouTuber Chris Williamson. Thanks so much for being with us, Chris.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me. The roles are reversed for once.
I know, it's my turn to interrogate you. Now, look, I want to ask you, first of all, just on a lightish note, New Year's resolutions, do you do them?
I do. Yeah, I'm a big fan of New Year's resolutions, and I have been for a while.
What are they?
Stop using my phone so much, go to bed on time, don't eat as much sugar. It's the basic things that everybody else does. The basic ones are the ones that are most important. What about you? Have you got any New Year's resolutions?
I'm trying to give up dry January, but anyway. I don't know. I mean, I always break them. But there is something to be said for the sort of reset, isn't there? The sort of January reset. I mean, Christmas is a kind of gluttonous season, probably always was, but yeah, resetting your body, for instance.
The best time to take a break from drinking is when you've got a massive hangover, and I think the best time to take a break from being a gluttonous pig is straight after you've just been one for a while. But I understand why people have got questions around New Year, New Me. It's become a bit of a meta meme, and by the end of January, about 80% of people have already given up on their resolutions. We're on the 3rd of January now, so maybe people have already started to peel off, and then only 8% of people actually achieve their New Year's resolution. So I understand why people have skepticism around it. Is this something which is even useful? There was a TikTok psychoanalyst and clinical social worker who said that she had disdain for resolutions on January the 1st because they're an unrealistic fantasy that will inevitably make you feel like a failure. Now, if we have lost the ability to be sufficiently brave to be able to take on eating less sugar or going to bed on time, I worry for the conviction that we have in other areas of our life as well.
Yeah, quite well said. I want to, tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris, because you've had an extraordinary journey in your career. You started off, as you say, as a self-declared ex-professional party boy. You now have this amazing following, online and off. You speak, among other things, to a lot of, I think I'm right in saying so, to a lot of young people. And it seems to me that one of the reasons for that is that there are very few people in our society who can give kind of guidance. There's a lot of lost young people in our societies, in Britain, America, in the West. And they're looking for not just sort of, dietary advice, but they're looking for sort of mental nurture and perhaps even sort of life nurturing. They want to do something with their lives, and nobody's giving them any advice.
Well, as you have written about, the grand narratives that we relied on for a very long time, many of them have collapsed. We find ourselves in a world which is hopelessly incompatible and unmatched to the evolutionary place that we found ourselves in 100,000 years ago. And people quite rightly are looking for, okay, so what does this mean? I have all of this freedom. I have all of this time. I have all of this opportunity and optionality in front of me. And between all of these different things, where should I go? It's confusing. There's this great idea called the paradox of choice by Barry Schwartz. So if we were to go back 50 years and you were to go and buy a pair of jeans, you would go into the store and there would be one type of jeans in a couple of different waist sizes, and you would walk out. And maybe they weren't the perfect pair of jeans that you wanted, but you felt satisfied with your decision because what else could you have chosen? Now you go in to buy a pair of jeans, and do you want bootcut or skinny or stretched? Do you want them to be bleached? Do you want them to be gray? Do you want them to be cropped? Any decision that you make with a suboptimal pair of jeans is now no longer because of constraints from the environment. It's because of you. It's because of your inability to make an appropriate decision. And this is where a multiplicity of options sounds like it would be great. It would open up so many different avenues for people. It means that you can choose exactly what you want, the pair of jeans in a lifestyle perspective. But look at what actually happens. People end up feeling trapped, paralysis of analysis, and they feel less satisfied with the decisions that they make. So more options aren't always the solution. And quite rightly, people look for guidance to help them navigate through whatever this new terrain is.
When people ask you what the big things were in your life that made you sort of, I'm not saying your life was in disorder, but to get your life in order, to get it to the place you are now, a huge following, very successful, just finished a major tour. What do you see as being the turning points in your own life?
So for most of my 20s was largely an adult infant. And I think a lot of young guys might be able to resonate with that I was succeeding in a way that maybe people in the UK would consider success, with a lot of freedom and being able to party and go out with your friends and stuff. But it wasn't fulfilling me existentially. And that meant I had to make some changes. Some of the biggest ones were sleeping with my phone outside of my bedroom. I found that I was chipping away at my sleep every single night, losing 30 minutes or an hour. And if I couldn't sleep, I could roll over and use it. And people say, but I use my phone for my alarm clock. Whatever will I do? Dude, radio alarm clocks have been around for like 1,000 years. Just go and get yourself a radio alarm clock. Another massive change that I made was I went sober for 6 months twice, and then I went sober for 1,000 days. I didn't drink that much. I wasn't a massive drinker, but I found that it really focused my time and my attention and my consistency. And basically getting a hangover is like electing to make yourself ill very chronically for about 24 or 36 hours, depending on how old you are. And that helped me to have more consistency, time, energy, attention to spend on things that I care about. So yeah, I mean, if people were able to do phone outside of bedroom and no alcohol for January, I think that by the end of it, they will find themselves in a much better place.
You've interviewed on your podcast some of the biggest brains on the planet. I'm not going to name any names, but
you've been on three times.
Yeah, I wasn't raising that, but genuinely, what do you think the most important things are that you've learned from people? What do you mean with the things that have really just stuck with you?
There's no such thing as success without consistency, no matter what it is that you want to do, whether it's build a business, lose weight, be richer, become a better parent, learn a skill. Being consistent won't guarantee success, but not being consistent will guarantee that you won't be successful. So this push and pull that people go through, this concern that they have about starting again at all. It's the beginning of the year. Why should I, 80% of New Year's resolutions are already given up by the end of January. What's even the point of me beginning to do this thing? Well, because your stick to it muscle is something that can be trained. And over time, yes, this year, maybe you only do make it to February, but next year, maybe you make it to March. And the year after that, maybe you make it to May. And that is way better than just admitting defeat. But yeah, for me, consistency is the one thing that all of the high achievers I've spoken to have got. But I am waiting. I am looking forward to the Douglas Murray fitness plan to come out eventually, which I've been promised at some point will be dropping. And every new year I look for it and it's not here.
That's a long stretch ambition for a lot of people. But what role does money play in happiness, do you think? Many people spend their whole lives pursuing it. Many people end up not doing what they wanted to do with their lives because they're chasing to be richer or chasing for a pay increase. What role do you think money does actually make people happy?
I think that being rich might not guarantee happiness, but being poor is probably a pretty good predictor of being miserable. Yeah. That there are certain material circumstances which are going to be imposed on you. Like being in poverty is such a huge stressor for people. You get trapped because all of your time is spent trying to deal with the problem of poverty or being poor. And that means that you don't have any time to do anything else, which traps you in poverty. So this is why you get to those who have more will be given, and to those who have less, more will be taken. That's why that dynamic occurs. I think that people should endeavor to get themselves to be comfortable. I do think that that's important, and it's an uncomfortable ground truth of reality. But once you've got there, chasing more and more and more money doesn't guarantee that you're going to be happy. I know a lot of people that are super rich and way more miserable than my friends who aren't.
Now, I've got to ask you one final question whilst I have you. You sent out a tweet today about a quite appallingly graphic type of personal injury which the male of the species can apparently suffer, particularly during the Christmas period. We're all safely out of that now. But can I just ask you on that subject, sex, love, where does that fit in?
I thought you were going to ask me about that very specific.
I can't actually go into the details because this is the family show.
Good. I'm glad. I think that there is a current anti-relationship culture. I think that men and women are increasingly seeing each other as adversaries, as enemies, and they're not. They're collaborators. They should and do work very well together. And I think that you don't need a relationship to live a happy life, but it definitely helps. And not prioritizing it is a high-risk strategy.
And sex?
Sex, as much of it as possible, ideally.
As much as possible?
Well, you know, when you're not on Piers Morgan Live hosted by Douglas Murray.
But as you know, but presumably, just quickly, you also mean, sort of playing the game. I think a lot of evidence shows isn't necessarily the way to happiness.
No, of course not. Of course, you don't need to have as much as possible. But I do think there's some interesting studies that have been released that say the amount of sex that you want to have is around about satisfaction and then a little bit more than the friends that are around you. If you are having a little bit less sex than the friends that are around you, it seems like you can quite highly predict whether someone will be dissatisfied with their sex life. So perhaps become friends with a bunch of priests or eunuchs, and then you'll feel satisfied with your sex life no matter how much you're having.
Well, Chris, thank you for joining us. And I certainly hope very much that you never suffer that particular personal Christmas injury you told us all about, which is going to haunt me for the rest of the year. Thank you, Chris Williamson.